Hey, good evening, everybody. Those of you in the US and North America, good day for everybody else around the world. I'm here with close to a dozen entrepreneurs, thought leaders, influencers, product managers. For those of you watching online, thank you for joining in. And I'm here with Mark Sackett from the Art of Active Networking fame. Mark is a serial entrepreneur, and I had the privilege to meet him a few weeks ago. A few things about Mark. He runs close to 13 businesses. He lives in New York, in LA, and now in San Francisco. He owns an event space called Box SF, which is not too far away from this venue, which is in Folsom Street. We also have a live conference that's happening, the flagship conference, TechCrunch Disrupt 2022. So when I did meet Mark, he did have a few questions to ask on networking. He asked me, what do you do? Who are you? What do you do for a living? And a bunch of things. It made me think and wonder, right? How does networking work at events? How does one get outcomes through various meetups, mixers, and events? So Mark, I'd like you to first introduce yourself, and I would be happy to ask you a few more questions along the way.
I'd be happy to answer them. My name is Mark E. Sackett. I have 13 companies, as he said. I am from Kansas. For those of you who might not know where that is, just get a US map and point to the middle. I moved to San Francisco in 1988, so I could be here in time for the earthquake. I'm a creative director, film producer, music producer, art director, graphic designer, public speaker, and entrepreneur. I don't really like the word entrepreneurship because I think it's a throwaway word for people who really don't know what they want to do. So I prefer to know what people are passionate about and have them follow those passions. And for those of you who are online, if you see me looking this way, it's because that's where the audience is sitting. So I don't like to just talk off to empty chairs. So I'm not ignoring you, but I also want to focus on some of the people in the room as well. So I live a passionate, creative life. I'm very blessed to get to do what I do for a living. I get to make things for a living. The synthesis of what I do is I've boiled it down to, I get to make things and I get paid for my ideas, which is like the best life ever, to come up with an idea and then have somebody say, I'll give you a lot of money for that idea is just, I'm 65 years old and I find that remarkable to this day. And I walk around my studios. I own a very famous building a few blocks from here. It's the old William Randolph Hearst printing plant. It's where my event space is. It's where my studios are and all my companies. And I walk around there at night sometimes and I'm just like, how did this ever happen? And I think that one of the things that's important for entrepreneurship, if that's a word you'd like to use, is to be passionate about what you do and to follow that passion. But also to be aware of the bigger world around you, to be aware of the possibilities around you. Because as entrepreneurs, we tend to get and especially in startups, we get very myopic. We have to get this thing launched. We have to go like this. We have to make this happen. Then we get so narrow that we stop looking to the left and to the right. And it's the biggest mistake we can make. And I'll tell you why. I don't know anybody in this room except you. And I don't know you that well. We've only met a few weeks ago. And I don't know what any of your talent is. I don't know what any of your passions are. I don't know what any of your connections are. I don't know who you are, how much money you have. And I honestly don't care about any of that. What I care about is one question. And I would like for you all, if possible, to answer that. How can I help you do better right now? And that's the question in networking that we should be asking. What we tend to do, and I was talking to somebody earlier and I said, if you come from need and want, which most entrepreneurs do, I need money, I need startup capital, I need staff, I need resources. I want to make this happen. I want to build my company. I want it to be famous. I want to sell it. I want to sell out and have somebody acquire me. It's all need and want based. And we all live in that world. I've lived in it for decades. But it's the wrong place to live because the word passion didn't come up in any of that. And so what happens is when we come from need and want, we never get what we need or what we want. When we come from giving to and helping others to do better, how can I help you to do better right now? Then we get what we need and want tenfold. And the example I used earlier, as I said, if I do something nice for one of you in this room tonight, you'll remember me for the rest of your life. If I try to sell you what I do for a living, you forget me by the time I walk out the door. And if you think about your life and those kinds of interactions that you have with people, you will find that to be true. Some guy, I talked to him, he was trying to sell me some shit, I don't know, right? And we've all been in that conversation. So what I do is 17 years ago, for fun, it's not a business. I've lost my ass on doing this for 17 years. I created something called the Art of Active Networking. And what the Art of Active Networking is it's my perspective on networking and my perspective on how networking should be done. And I'm going to ask you one of the questions that I actually forbid at my events, because it's a two-part question and it's important that we understand the difference in the two parts. So when people come to my events, I'll get maybe 100, 150 people per event, no matter what city I do it in the world, whether it's in Europe or the United States or Canada or anywhere, is everybody has 30 seconds to answer 4 questions. Now, I do that for 2 reasons. One is, if I ask you these 4 questions, and maybe I'll do it with one of you and see if you can do it, but people have trouble answering these 4 questions in 30 seconds. Here's why. They go into a sales pitch. They start telling me about their company. They start telling me about their needs and their wants and all these other things, and I never get the answers to 2 of the questions because they've run out of time. Now, at my events, if you run out of time, you get gonged by a big Chinese gong. And when you hear that gong, you have to shut up. We don't ever learn the other answers. And it's because I've coached you ahead of time and you haven't listened to the coaching, right? So you have to do it in 30 seconds. And the whole point is, if I have 150 people in the room and each one of you gets 30 seconds for that, stand up and answer the 4 questions. Now you're the center of attention, and I ask everybody in the room, pay attention to what that person's saying, because when you get your turn, everybody's going to be paying attention to you. Now think about this. If I've done this for 30,000 people right now around the world. Think about if I put 30,000 people in an arena and we start talking about something we're struggling with or something that we actually need help with or an idea that we have that could really change the world. Do you think that 30,000 people could help probably to solve that as a mindset? I think we could make a good start at it, but we all have to be in a place of giving and helping one another with that real desire and getting our own agenda out of the way, at least for that 30 seconds, so that we can clearly listen and say, how can I help you to do better right now? I'm going to hear your 30 seconds, and then I'm going to say, all right. And I have 250,000 people in my network. I'm one of the 100 most connected people in the world on LinkedIn, according to LinkedIn. You don't get anything for that, by the way. You get a letter that says, congratulations, you're one of the 100 most connected people in the world. I'm like, great. And so I have 152 social media pages. So I'm Googleable. I had to say that on a date once because I was being challenged at what I did for a living. And finally I said, can we just not talk about work and careers? And finally they said, well, but what do you do? And I said, I own 13 companies and I live in 3 cities. And the response I got was, well, that sounds like a crock of shit. And I'm like, I know. So finally they were relentless, and I've only just said, look, I'm Googleable. I'm not sure if Googleable is a word, but we tend to go there when we need to find out the truth. And so they Googled me while we were at dinner. And I'm like, so when they got to the 10th page of Google, they're like, oh, well, you're for real. I'm like, all right, now can we move on? So let's not define each other tonight or any night by the question, what do you do for a living? Because that's a sorting question, okay? What do you do for a living? I'm a real estate agent. What do you do for a living? I'm a programmer. What do you do for a living? I'm an entrepreneur with a startup. Now, if I don't need a programmer or a real estate agent or an entrepreneur with a startup, then I'll be like, well, it was really nice to meet you. And now I'm going to move on to you and hear what you are about, because we use the what do you do for a living question as a sorting method. Need, don't need, want, don't want. And we sort all those people out of our life. Now, what if I do that to one of you, and what if you're the person who actually could probably help me more than anybody else, because you have the connection to that one person that I need, and I did something nice for you, you did something nice for me, we actually made a genuine connection, and now we're willing to help each other. But I just sorted you out because don't need that right now, right? So does that all make sense to anybody?
Should we like make it a little more interactive with the questions?
Yeah, we
that
can
you
do
have?
that. I mean, so let me ask you. Let me ask you. I'm going to ask you the 4 questions. You can come up here with us if you want to, since the people online might not be able to see you, or you've got a microphone, so they'll be able to at least hear you. So here are the 4 questions. Does anybody have a way to time me for 30 seconds?
Yes.
Okay. Somebody get ready. You're my timer.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me when I'm ready to go. Okay. So 30 seconds. I'm going to ask you the 4 questions. Okay. And I'll ask all the questions first, then you answer them. Okay. Who are you? What do you do for a living or want to be doing? And I told you it was a 2-part question. The reason I asked that is I don't know what it's like for all of our listeners online who might not be in the United States, but 70% of all Americans are unhappy doing what they do for a living, and if they had an opportunity to change, would. And that's pathetically sad statistic to me. All right? So who are you? What do you do for a living or want to be doing? What would you rather be doing? Why are you sitting here or listening in right now? What brought you here tonight? And this is kind of your ask. You need something, ask for it, okay? And what is it in life that you're most passionate about? Now, I'll call bullshit if I don't like your answers, and I'll tell you why, okay? But go.
I'm a software engineer.
Are you timing it?
I want to be a writer.
You want to be what?
A writer.
Okay.
What was the third question?
What do you do for a living or want to be doing?
Writing.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And what is the next one?
Why are you here tonight?
Curiosity.
Okay. And what is it in life that you're absolutely most passionate about?
Figuring out how people connect with each other.
What does that look like for you? I'm just curious.
I build products that make it easy for people to connect indirectly, I guess.
So you went to work.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So stay away from work. What are you passionate about that has nothing to do with making money or career or any of that?
I just like to read a lot, just to understand the world.
Eat?
Read.
Oh, read.
Read.
Sorry, your accent got me.
To understand the world, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So do you all see how that goes? And you see how, first of all, when you put 150 people in a room and we're going rapid fire, it's really fun. It does put a responsibility on everybody listening and everybody in this room to think, okay, like as I'm listening to these answers, how can I use my network, my knowledge, my skill set to help get him what he wants? Okay. So if you ask me those same 4 questions, I live a passionate life. I get to make things. My name's Mark Sackett. I'm here because I was invited to speak, but I'm mostly here because I've never met a stranger and I love connecting with people. And I am most passionate about playing the drums and traveling the world. And I'm never happier than when I get to make something. So you really didn't hear a lot about my career as a designer. You didn't hear about my needs as I want to grow my event space. You didn't hear about me really talk about work, right? And so what's important about that is it gives people an opportunity to say, oh, I play drums. Oh, I like to read. Let's go. I want to go see what he wants, what he likes to read. Because after the event, after everybody's done their 30 seconds, it's like, all right, go meet the people that you're interested in meeting. And you'd be surprised at how many people, the room's quiet like this whenever I start an event. At the end of the night, when everybody's done their 30 seconds and we wrap up, now it's like, okay, now go meet everybody. Now go network. And the noise level is out of control. And remarkable things have happened. We've saved people's homes that were on the verge of bankruptcy. We've helped find hundreds of people jobs. We've helped people quit their jobs because they were miserable doing what they were doing for a living. We've had 3 engagements and 2 weddings of people who met at my events, which I think is the coolest thing. Not for me, but good for them. We've had 1 couple who actually came up to me, both of them, and said, "We're getting divorced." And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? And they said, "We're getting divorced, and thank you. You made us realize that we're just not meant for each other." And we both talked about it, and we wanted you to know, like, this event really helped us get that clarity. I'm not suggesting that people come to my event so they can find out if they should be divorced, but I thought that it was really cool that it had that kind of an impact for them. And I've gotten to meet people all over the world in some of the you can't imagine the weird stuff that people do for a living. Now, I'm assuming, I might be wrong, but I'm assuming everybody here is in tech somehow. probably not a wild assumption, but that's a very narrow focus. And what I've found oftentimes is when people work in tech, that they get more and more myopic, more and more focused. They're hunkered down. Especially, I had to do one of these events for a bunch of programmers. Boy, that was tough. Like I barely could get them to talk to each other. It was like, it's like being at a bad high school dance. It's like, hey, come over here and talk to the girls. Come over here and talk to the boys. But they were some of them didn't even know how to really relate to each other. And, I think the pandemic has made that worse for people worldwide. I mean, we do this now, we meet on Zoom. You guys can't tell my body language really. You can't tell who I am as a person. It's hard for me to shake your hand. It's hard for me to certainly look anybody in the eyes. And that's what I like to do when I'm talking to people. I think it's a different way of connecting. But and I've been asked 50 times, will you do your events virtually like this? And I'm like, I don't like to do them virtually. I like to meet people, and I do a lot of public speaking. So I speak at conferences, and I spoke to, about 3 months before the pandemic, I spoke to 3,200 people in New Orleans for the American Institute of Graphic Arts conference. And it was fascinating to me to watch the dynamic of 3,200 people pre-pandemic. So the world's changed now. We have different sensitivities than we used to. But to watch that kind of dynamic unfold in a room that big. And who gravitates to the front, whose ears up, who's listening, who's like, when is this going to be over? And we have all those kinds of people. And when you're a speaker or you're up on stage, your nightmare is that something's going to go wrong, the mic's not going to work, the cameras are going to fail, I don't know, there's going to be an earthquake. I mean, God knows what. And then on top of that, you get hecklers in the audience and all that kind of stuff. And so you have to learn to sort of juggle all that stuff and keep the people who are listening engaged and excited. And for me, hopefully, like you guys might say, that guy was an idiot. I don't care what people think about me, because then I wouldn't get anything done in my life if I sat around and was wringing my hands worried about whether you guys like me or not. That's not what my goal is. My goal is to walk out of here and you're like, that one thing he said 5 minutes in, I like that. And maybe you can use that. Maybe you can go use that in a relationship. Or maybe the next time you meet somebody, what's the first question we always ask each other? What's the first question you guys ask each other when you go to an event? Come on. Anybody? What do you do for a living? We all do it. It's the sorting question. Try for the next month, every event you go to, not to ask that question again. How are you doing? What are you passionate about? What brought you here tonight? That's what people would probably like to be asked. Oh, I have a startup. I want to talk to you about it. I don't get away from you quick enough. And I'm old. And I have a lot of companies, and I know a lot of people. So I get that question a lot. And you can't tell how many times I want to just run away from the room, because I'm like, please don't ask me those questions. I don't like those questions. You're already off on the wrong path. And when you start doing that, and you live in that whole need, want, sorting mentality, it's just going to be a lot tougher road for you. Yeah. Did you have some questions that wanted to ask
Mark,
me?
I think this would take like a complete workshop.
Of course.
TEDx conference and the workshops that you do at.
Well, I have a TED talk about this, and I have a second TED talk that's.
Maybe since you have a couple of minutes more before your next assignment, we could take another question, or
I'm happy to answer any question. Do you have a way to take questions online, or?
Yeah, so we're crowdsourcing questions online.
Okay. All right.
And I would put that across to you.
Sure, I'm happy to answer.
Will be able to
if it'll help somebody, happy to do it.
So does anybody else here have a question around art of active networking? Have you been to a lot of events?
Well, that didn't go well, did it?
We have a question from him.
Hey, Mark.
Hey.
So my question is, what do you do if you're interested in all these things? Like, you want to connect, you have curiosity, you want to know what people are excited about, but you're finding that it's not coming back in the other direction, and you're just kind of hitting a brick wall with certain people?
I'm fairly relentless. So, but not to the point. Look, I'll tell you, a friend of mine, Napata, she's a very famous Bay Area singer. And I met her one night at the Westin Lobby Bar. A friend of mine was performing, and I was sitting eating some dinner, and she walked in and she walked up to me and she says, "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" And I was like, "No." And she sat down and she says, "What's your name?" And I told her, and she goes, "You're fascinating." And I was like, I am? And she says, you are to me. And I said, why is that? She says, I don't know yet. I'm going to find out. And I said, well, what does that mean? And she said, I walked into this room, and there's 70 people in here, and I feel like the world, individuals are like tuning forks. And you all maybe relate to this. You walk into a room, and you immediately are like, I need to talk to that person. And you're kind of tuned to each other, right? And then all of a sudden, it's like, bam, we're like two magnets, and it's like we have a lot to talk about. And you've all been in those effortless conversations, yes? And you've also all been in the conversation that he asked me about. Like, we're just like, I'm just not getting anywhere with this person. I'll try, and I'm pretty good at getting in. But if I can't get in, you know, some people just have walls up and they just don't want to talk to you, or for whatever reason. I have people said, one guy said to me, and I'm not lying, I don't want to talk to you because you're fat. And I don't have any respect for somebody who's overweight, because it shows that you don't care about your body. And I was like, interesting. What I said back to him was, I used to weigh 375 pounds. I now weigh 275 pounds. I've lost over 100 pounds because I had a heart condition. And every time I tried to work out, my heart went out of rhythm and I was unable to work out for about 17 years. But I appreciate your honesty. Have a great night. Okay? I have been judged for my age, but my weight, my color of my skin, I mean, all the nonsense that we go through, the fact that I'm bisexual, people are like, oh, dear. You know, like, so we have, those are all sorting things. You know, oh, well, he doesn't like men, he doesn't like women. Wait, he likes both? I don't understand that. Okay, I can't talk to this guy. And he's fat? I mean, like, who cares about all that shit? But that's what we do. These are all sorting questions. You know, he's an entrepreneur. I'm told that I'm intimidating. My response to that is, am I intimidating you right now, or are you intimidated by me, perhaps? And lately, people have said, oh, I'm intimidated by you. I'm like, why? I'm one of the nicest people you're ever going to meet. Why would you be intimidated by that? And that's somebody else's insecurity. So whenever I'm in conversations, I'm aware of all these possibilities. And I try my best to navigate why we're not connecting, why I'm not getting through. But I also recognize that I'm not going to get through to everybody, and everybody's not going to get through to me because we might not be tuned together. Does that make sense? So, I mean, sometimes you just got to be like, okay, next, you know, but, you know, it's not, we can't be all things to all people, and we shouldn't try to be. We need to be authentic to who we are, of course.
Great. I think
where'd you go? Like, all of a sudden you were gone.
Thought we could let the others also have a look at you. So I think what we'll do, Mark, we have shared your coordinates online. So people who have questions for you,
Sure,
we'll put that across to you, and we will stay connected to you, and hopefully we get more people excited about meetups that you do and the workshops that you do.
Yeah, I'm going to try to start my events back, I hope. I mean, the way I do it, so I have a very strong feeling about this. I charge $20 for my events so I can pay my staff and stuff like that. But I also, it's not because I need the money, it's because people don't value what they don't pay for. You have how many RSVPs for tonight? 70?
Yeah.
You have 70 RSVPs for this room. People don't value what they don't pay for. They sign up, they probably signed up for 5 events tonight. They may come later, we don't know. They might not come early, the other event might be running late, who knows what the excuses are. But people, for the most part, don't value what they don't pay for. Well, I got a reservation, I'll go if I want. But if they had paid $10 to be here, this room would be full. They don't value what they don't pay for, you know? I know, but there's always an excuse, you know? And there might be, it means from their perspective, it's a better event, or they're having more fun over there, or they don't want to pull themselves away. We have all kinds of excuses for why we show up or we don't show up. But if they had paid $10 to be here or $5 to be here, they'd be here. I'll guarantee you. I've done thousands of events. So is there any more questions I can answer for anybody? Happy to. You're late.
Yeah, he has a question.
Say something.
So
He has a question.
yeah, we have a couple more minutes, so we'll just take a question and
Sure.
then.
He has right in the corner. He had a question.
Hi. Yeah, sorry, I missed most of it. So my question, this is about like Web3 crypto-based things, right? So
Can you speak up a little bit?
about like Web3 crypto-based things. I'm just curious, what are your favorite like projects that are out right now that we could use as like inspiration or just like a good role model of a good Web3 application?
You mean my companies or my projects or what?
Anything. Yeah, projects.
I mean, my passion project right now is downstairs in my building. In 2018, I opened the largest antique advertising store in the world. There's 15 million pieces of rare printed history that date back to 1700, and we have clients from all over the world that come in. We had 3 today from 3 different countries. I'm blown away by who shows up. That's my passion project. So as a graphic designer, people know my work. I did Blue Diamond Almonds. I designed the Levi's labeling. I rebranded MGM 8 years ago, the movie studios. So, I mean, I'm very blessed to be able to have done some big creative work. My other project that I'm working on right now, I haven't really launched yet. It's called Pickpocket Wearables, and it's a unique line of apparel that I'm designing that I came up with this nutty idea during the pandemic. And I've got about 17 projects I'm working on right now. I'm getting ready to start my next film, my next feature film, which will be out in about 2 years with Halle Berry and Justin Timberlake. It's a script I'm writing and a project that I'm passionate about called Blood Sisters. You know, for me, it's never about like, I don't do one thing. And so I'm always very happy to be doing many different things that satisfy my ability to make things, you know?
Great, great. We have one more question.
Yeah.
Hello, Mark. I'm Fouad. Very impressed by what you said, and I'm still processing because it's very inspiring. My question is around how you build a lot of connection, as you mentioned, with people. Your LinkedIn, 250,000, if I'm not mistaken, 100,000. I don't know the exact number, but a huge amount of connection.
You mean my network?
Yeah.
It's about 250,000 people, maybe.
Yeah. So it's huge. But is it connection or is it more an audience? I mean,
it's a little of both.
Okay.
I mean, LinkedIn is the worst possible platform to connect with people on because you get all the salespeople who are pushy trying to sell something, right? And so every about once a month, I go into LinkedIn and delete 300 or 400 people who are just constantly barraging me with things they want to sell so that I can make room for the So first of all, LinkedIn locks your profile at 30,000 connections. It's ridiculous. And so I got my profile locked about 7 years ago. Not locked, but once I'm below 30,000, then I can add people. Well, now I have like over 12,000 requests. You know, if I'm on a stage speaking and I speak to 300 people, I usually get 150 requests, right? Because people love LinkedIn as a platform. But you can connect with me on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can Google me. Like I said, I'm Googleable. So, you know, I've got 6 Instagrams and, you know, so I have very deep, genuine connections on Instagram, on Facebook, although I don't like Facebook anymore. It's like they've over-meted it. So LinkedIn has never provided me a single piece of business or a single really genuine connection, but I've been able to help a lot of people find jobs there because I have an Art of Active Networking group within LinkedIn. I will tell you that my events and meetup have been my most genuine connections because I have I got rid of about 6 of my meetups when the pandemic hit in a number of countries and cities that only had like 500-600 people in them. But I've kept San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York. And my San Francisco meetup has, I think, over 7,000 people in it. And over half those people have attended my events. You know, there's always going to be, in every room, there's going to be a lurker. You know, the people who sit back in the corner and they just observe. And then half the time they'll hear from them, but they won't make any other effort to connect with me. So usually if somebody doesn't make any real genuine effort to know me or to connect with me, I'm not going to probably spend a lot of time on them just because I don't have the time. I mean, I've got the same number of minutes in the day that you have, but I do my best. People have said to me many times how grateful they are and how good I am at getting back to them. As long as you don't send me an email, because like I get 1,000 emails a day and I can't do that. But I try. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for your questions. So I hear that we have limited time. So what we'll do is we'll gather more questions, put it across to you.
What does that mean? You're going to put them across to me when? Like at midnight, I'm going to get a text message? I don't understand what that means.
You will, yeah. So there is a lot of online audience. And,
I know.
And the comment section.
Are they going to ask me some questions now? I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah.
No? Okay. Sorry.
So one thing we do is we try to extend the lifetime of an event.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But how
It's
are
a
you going to ask me
community.
questions?
So it's going to be like a recorded voice and a text, which you could answer.
That's going to come where? To my phone?
No, it's going to come on the link that you see there, SF181022.
Okay.
So I'll share that with you, and we also have your coordinates written there
You still haven't answered my question. You're going to share it to me where?
on message and email, on WhatsApp, email, multiple
dear.
sources.
Okay. Oh, I'm happy to answer them all.
Yeah.
I will get back to you eventually.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I have this vision, like I'm going to hear from you at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and you're going to be like, "Hey, can you answer this question?" I'm like, "I'm sorry, what?"
Yeah.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's okay.
What are you most passionate about?
What am I most passionate about?
And what's your biggest pain point? And what's the biggest thing that you think everybody else is wrong about?
When it comes to me?
No, just about tech or the industry.
Well, I think what most people are wrong about is this, what I said at the beginning. I don't think you were here quite at the beginning, was that they come from need and want. They worry about what they're going to get, not what they're going to give. For me, I have something called My Give For. And My Give For is this. I ask, and I'll ask each one of you to do it. I'll ask each one of you to consider doing it. Very few of you will actually do it. Some of you might do it already. Spend 4 hours a week for the rest of your life giving to and helping other people. And I'm going to give you 4 ways to do that, because that's a difficult thing to just say. Give of your ideas and your talent freely. Some of you are consultants. Stop trying to charge for everything. Just say, hey, I see that you're struggling with that. I've had some experience with it. Maybe I can help. Offer your ideas and your talent freely. Number 2, give of your time, volunteer. And I would ask you to volunteer outside of what you normally do. I'm not saying go volunteer and do some programming or a couple of meetings to help a startup get off the ground. I'm talking about go out and clean up a damn beach, and go out and pick up some trash, and go out and help somebody get off of one knee. Help somebody, okay? Number 3, and this is the hardest one for people, give of your money. And because everybody's like, money? I don't have enough money. I can't be giving my money away. I just went through a pandemic. I don't have enough money to give away. Well, I'm sorry. If you're here in this room, you probably could put $1 in somebody's cup on the street, or you could, one of the ways that I do it is almost every time I'm at a Starbucks, I turn to the person behind me and I say, what are you getting? And I just buy them what they're asking. I don't say, would you like a coffee? I say, what do you want? The other day, a woman got 2 croissants and a cup of coffee. I'm like, great. She's like, why did you do that? And I said, why not? So, although 3 weeks ago, I turned around and I said to this guy, what would you like? And he goes, why? And I said, well, because I'm going to get you what you want. And he goes, no. And he literally put his hands in the air and backed away from me as if I had a knife in my hand. And I was like, what? And he goes, I don't need your help. I'm like, I don't suspect that you need my help. What do you want to drink? And he goes, no, I'll buy my own drink. I don't need your help. And he refused. He refused for me to buy him a cup of coffee. And the 4th one is, so give of your ideas and your time freely, give of your money, donate, give of your time, volunteer, and the second most important, give of your network connections. So, and this is why this is important. We talk about networking. If I let's say I want to make a connection to you, or no, let's say you and I have made a connection, and let's say that he says, do you know anybody who really loves to read and write? And I'm like, yeah, hey, you know what? I just met somebody. Yes, I'd like to make a connection for you. Now, if I call you up and I was like, hey, I met this guy and I'd like to make an introduction, would that be okay? Now, presumably, you like me enough tonight in this limited exchange that you said, hey, I like Mark. He seems trustworthy. Yeah, sure. Go ahead and make the introduction. Now, I'm going to call him back and I'm going to all right, give him a call. I got an opening for you or whatever, right? The way that we meet people, the way that these connections are really the most important is through what I call know, like, and trust relationships. If I know you, that's the first step. If I come to like you, that's an important step. If I don't like you, what's the point, right? And if I trust you, that's the 3rd step. Now, if I know you and I like you, but you doing something untrustworthy or I just don't trust you, we're not going to have any further conversations. What's the point, right? But if I know you and I trust you, but I really just don't like you, I don't like how you behave or how you show up in the world, what's the point? So all 3 of those things have to be there for a connection to happen. Know, like, and trust. It's how we really do business in the world. If I don't know you, none of those are important because I don't know you, right? So know, like, and trust are the 3 ways that you can really connect with people, and it's the 4th tenet of my Give 4. Make those referrals based on know, like, and trust connections. I know somebody that might be able to help you. Let me reach out. I'll do that for you. Because I mean, I've worked in the entertainment business for 25 years. Try to get through the door of an executive at Warner Brothers. The assistants have assistants. And those are gatekeepers, and it's hard to get through to the person you want to get to. And you know, you can only hear no so many times, and then you're like, I'm going to move on and do something else with my life. You know, but if you know, like, and trust, and that know, like, and trust is there, I can call almost anybody now in my network in the entertainment business, and they're going to pick up the phone. They're like, Mark, how have you been? And blah, blah, blah. I'm like, hey, listen, I got this young intern, I got this young guy, I got this young girl. They're looking for an in. They want to do an internship at Warner Brothers this coming summer. You think you could help me out? I'm like, sure, have them give me a call. It happens hundreds of times a year for me. But that wouldn't happen without know, like, and trust. So that's the 4th part of my Give 4. But if anybody here starts practicing my Give 4, you will see a significant change in your life. A lot of people talk about religion. Just start going to church and praying to God. Well, okay, that might help you too. I don't know. But that's not what I do. My religion is my Give 4. And if you help other people to do better, it's not a matter of whether it ever comes back to you. I don't care whether it ever comes back to me. But if I can help somebody else to do better, or I can make 2 of you connect, or I can go out and help somebody because I did a beach cleanup, or you know, I'm leaving here in a minute because I have to go out to tonight is the San Francisco District Attorney's debate, and I'm pushing hard for one of our candidates because I think that she's going to change some of the nonsense that we deal with here in San Francisco, and I'm going out to support her in this debate. That's part of why I have to leave, and so that's me showing up again. It's me volunteering my time to show up and just to be there for something that I think is important for the city, you know. And so I spend a lot of my time doing this kind of stuff, this event tonight. I mean, I don't know any of you. I may never hear from any of you again, but I'm grateful to have been invited. I'm grateful to be able to share, whether it's valuable to you or not. I'm grateful to be able to help if I can help in some way. So I'm sure my information's somewhere that people will be able to reach me, and I'm sure I'm going to get text messages at 2 o'clock in the morning from him, you know, I have my Instagrams are fine for what I do there. The Box SF Mercantile is probably the one I'm on daily in the Box SF events. But what I really prefer is a text message. This is dumb. Everybody's like, don't give out your cell phone. But I really prefer text messages to my cell phone because I answer those every day. My phone's never not out of my hands because my mom died in January and my dad's 90 years old. And that phone is on 24/7 and it's next to my bed in case anything happens to my dad. So people know all over the world that they can reach me on my phone usually.
I use a Google Voice number myself too.
Yeah, I don't know Google Voice. I have a T-Mobile and iPhone.
So the hashtag is mygive4 and
hashtag mygive4. Yeah.
So I think we'll all keep this in mind, and we will, like, trust,
and trust.
Know, like, and trust.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Mark, for joining us.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you. Thank you for whoever's in that little round circle.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks.
A big round of applause for Mark for sharing some really compelling insights. And while we do this, while you unmic yourself, I'd like to introduce the next moderator. So this is a tech session on product management. And while we do that, we have a set of other questions that you folks online can answer, can watch. So this panel is around product management. We have 5 speakers over here. Another speaker is at TechCrunch at an investor pitch, so she may not be able to join us. So while Naveen gets mic'd up, I'd like to just introduce Naveen. I've known him for almost forever. He's been in the innovation-led startup space. He's sold a couple of companies. He's been mentoring many startups. He's a senior product leader. And he's been making a difference with many entrepreneurs, not just in the US, but all across the world, in South America, in Europe, across India, Asia. So this session is going to be around learnings in the deep tech space. How do product managers evolve? I'd like Naveen to come on stage when he's ready. He could invite some of the speakers one by one or together, and he has a set of questions that he could ask each one of them. Over to you, Naveen. Yeah. Yeah, so we're just setting the stage and getting the speakers on top. So while we do that, I would request those of you who are in the room to come down here. Would you mind sitting here? Yeah, so it's just easier for the panelists to watch you, right? So you could just, yeah, you could just sit here and the audience could sit here. Yeah.
I think it's four of us. Perfect. Vinay, is it four of us? Okay, Kate. Okay, all right, awesome. Hi everyone. So before we get started and introduce to the panel here, just want to talk about the topic. The topic is product management in the era of Metaverse and Web3. So a quick story before we start. So many years ago, 1983, John Scully, the president of Pepsi, was approached by Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs wanted John to run Apple, become the CEO of Apple. And John was thinking for a long time. He actually was not reluctant to part with Pepsi, which was doing really good. And Apple was almost like a very young upstart company. So the question that Steve posed to John was, do you want to keep selling sugar water the rest of your life, or do you want to come with me and change the world? One of my close friends who's in the crypto space has been asking the exact same question to me. And I've been in SaaS all my life. The Web3 and the Metaverse is something new to me. And today's panel, I'm hoping, can help me decide whether I want to keep doing sugar water, SaaS, or switch to Metaverse and Web3. So to kick it off, I would like the panel to introduce themselves. We have three distinguished guests here. Maybe Paul, you can start.
I'm Marpal Singh, and I am an entrepreneur as well as an educator. And I've done multiple startups. Have been lucky to take one company public, and and sold the other three, and work with a lot of the startups in the B2B enterprise space, helping them hopefully avoid the mistakes that I did.
Hi everyone, I'm Ankita Verma. I'm the co-founder CEO of Persona. Persona is a Web3 based data intelligence and customer intelligence platform. So we help Web3 businesses know their customers, grow their customers, and engage their customers better. We recently closed our seed round, so it's a very, very exciting time for us. Prior to Persona, I used to lead product management at Amazon. So I've been part of the AWS AI team and Alexa. I come with around 10 to 12 years of experience in product management and tech investing. So very excited to be here.
Thank you. So my name is Marcus Lampinen, and I am one of the co-founders of Perfina. I am a product engineer by background. I've built different software products around different paradigm shifts. So at the start of, for example, call it the more democratized investment market with crowdfunding and peer-to-peer loans, and now with data. I believe that in 10 years, we're going to be building products where essentially we as individuals get to use our data. so that's not always just companies using it for their own benefit.
Oh, sorry, I dropped my mic. Just introducing myself, I'm Naveen Aknori. I'm running the product and engineering teams at Bootstrap.ai. I've been in tech for almost 25 years, mostly SaaS. And I'm going to ask these folks a lot of interesting questions. So I'm going to kick it off. So first question to Marcus. So Metaverse. Last week, Facebook had an event. They had a keynote. And one of the things that came out of it is their monthly active users, actually, they changed the goal. It was 500,000 originally. They actually reduced it. The question is, what do you think is going on? Is it because they spent like $10 billion last year, right? And for $10 billion, the adoption rate seems very low, especially a company with such a huge amount of users in other spaces, right? So is it, are they trying to force something that doesn't exist yet? Or is there something missing that needs to happen before Metaverse takes off?
It's a great question. It kind of follows similar type of, call it revelations in the market, where you looked at what are the actual active user numbers in different types of projects. Maybe it's not so much of a shift as it is a way of presenting the products. We used to have, let's say, before the current economic landscape, think back 6 months ago, 10 months ago, and so on and so forth. We used to have a very aspirational way of setting those types of goals and communicating them to the market. And maybe what we're finding is that it's good to be a little bit more practical and good to kind of start from the utility and why people would be there to begin with, as opposed to just kind of looking at how do we get tons of active users. I will say, however, that you're absolutely right that Zuckerberg did say that, you know, they're going to spend $10 billion, recruit 10,000 engineers and so on and so forth. So, you know, for us that are recruiting engineers, so it's great that if they're scaling back a little bit, we have a little bit more room in the market.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of, I think it's perhaps the most well-funded startup that exists in the universe. And, you know, there is a common saying that startups die because of, you know, indigestion rather than starvation. So I think they already have an indigestion. And, you know, there is a certain aspect, certain things just belong in a startup with a startup motion and startup journey before they become mainstream. And they're trying to start from the other direction. And I think this is why, unfortunately, because they're a public company, everything is open in the public, and it is very difficult for them to hide. But, you know, startups go through that journey, and, you know, no matter how much funded you are, you're going to go through this journey. And so I think they're just going through that start-stop that every startup experiences in their life.
What's your opinion, Ankita, given that you're coming from Amazon?
Yeah, I mean, when somebody asks me this question, right, I really like to approach it from going back to the basics. Like, as a product manager, if I look at this problem, I really look at it from the perspective of what's the user journey like, not just to the metaverse, but for any technology or any new paradigm, right? And if you think of the user journey, it's essentially like 4 steps. So one is the user discovery. So how does the user discover the metaverse? The second is the user onboarding. So how does the user onboard to the metaverse? The third is retention. So why would a user keep coming back to the metaverse? And the fourth is more like growth, right? So I am a user of the metaverse. Why would I ask my friends to come and join me in the metaverse? And I feel like today, at this stage, we are still like pretty early. So metaverse has a lot of promise. And of course, when it comes to the vision is there. And metaverse can potentially help us in a lot of things, be it like, you know, travel or hospitality or health, you know, every field that I can think of, metaverse has tremendous potential. But if you think of these 4 aspects, so today discovery, it's pretty hard, right? I mean, to use the metaverse, I need to spend like hundreds of dollars on getting a really clunky headset, and so it's hard for me. If you look at the onboarding, to onboard onto the metaverse, I have to connect my wallet, and today the wallet experience is pretty broken. It's not at all user friendly. If you think of retention, today the metaverse use cases are pretty superficial. It's not something where engagement is figured out. So as a user, I don't have an incentive to keep going back. And if you think of growth, same thing, right? I mean, the first 3 steps, it's itself so broken. So growth is like a thing of even more like ahead into the future. So metaverse definitely as a concept, I feel like has a lot of promise, has a lot of potential. But for any new technology, you have to figure these 4 steps out for mass adoption. So we are pretty early. We are still figuring out step 1.
Right. I actually have a follow-up on that one. So one of the interesting things Mark Zuckerberg said in the keynote is they are really investing in enterprise side of things. So enterprise is, in some sense, the choice is sort of owned by the company and not by the consumer or the user, right? So imagine that the company gets the headsets for everybody, and then they're in the virtual world. Everyone is remote now, so you basically connect.
Yeah.
And then the CEO is presenting something to the company, and then he cracks a really bad joke. 90% of the people do not laugh, 10% laugh. And now you have inward cameras, facing cameras, which you can actually capture the expression of the person, right? So from that perspective, I feel like when you go the enterprise route, suddenly Microsoft seems to have a bit of control now, right? Like, because they can tell the company what to do, and now they can provide these, I guess, maybe not good experiences for the people, but good for the company. Because now you know who didn't laugh at your jokes that when you're doing your all hands.
Yeah, I mean, so definitely. I mean, the goal of the metaverse is to make it as real as possible, right? So in the real world, when we used to have real world meetings, these factors were still there, right? As a leader, I could observe who is not laughing at my jokes, right? So I think, of course, any technology comes with its own set of the pros and the cons, right? When we were building AI, everybody was like, AI has all of this huge potential, but it's going to take away our jobs. But that's not happening, right? I mean, what's happening is AI is pushing this all entire new realm of technology and making things possible that were not possible before. So same, I would say I'm a very firm believer that metaverse is real. It's gonna unlock so many things that we cannot even think of today. And of course, it will come with its own set of challenges, which we will learn to deal with.
Well, what's your take on employees being forced, and that's being one of the strategies for Facebook to get into the market?
So I'm never a supporter of that. I just think that that's a bad way of doing company management. However, I think there are some real use cases. So if you think about like Google Glass, I remember, walking on the streets of San Francisco where people used to say, oh my God, Google Glass not allowed in this restaurant. And everybody thought Google Glass is a mainstream product. And it failed, right? So how did it succeed? It succeeded when they found out that actually there are some real use cases where it makes a lot of sense to pay that $1,500. And now it's, in my mind, a very successful product. It has found those use cases, the vertical use cases. And I think this is what the metaverse has to do. A use case of me carrying in an office call, sitting with the glasses for more than 30 minutes without a headache, it's just not practical. Let's not even go there. It's not going to make sense. I think maybe we'll have to wait for Apple, since they already have a CPU in everybody's pocket, that once they do the glass, they can do a very light glass, which does not require this huge, setup that I'm carrying with me. So I think if they find real vertical use cases where it makes sense, they might succeed. But my concern is they don't have an enterprise DNA in the company. And you don't get that overnight. We have seen how many companies fail when they try to change their DNA to something else. So it may not succeed from there. They may create a lot of technologies for us and a lot of entrepreneurs to use the ideas and actually create new products. So thank you, Facebook.
Okay. Marcus, do you have a thought on that one? The same thing?
Yeah, just following on from there, really. I think For mass adoption, we are terribly early to even discuss mass adoption, really. Vertical use case absolutely makes sense. The one thing that comes to mind is we've been working a lot with consumer brands at Perfina. And for example, in the fashion industry, then Metaverse and personal avatars and how you see yourself in different types of environments. I mean, 100% clicks for me. But that's something like, you know, if you imagine the experience of going in to shopping mall, picking out some garments and testing them, you know, in front of a mirror. But if you could do that at home before you even go in, I mean, that's a very, very consumer focused use case. It's not, you know, your boss spying in on you. It's about you yourself getting something. So I think that there is promise in those. One of my co-founders and colleagues, he always kind of tells me to think, you know, I'm getting old. And he always tells me to kind of think that, you know, what would the 15-year-olds actually do? And if we think about consumer, that's a mindset that I always try to kind of get into. And I think essentially there, fashion, self-expression, also self-care, and so on and so forth. Those are huge use cases. But then to be honest, those are also an area where being able to deal with things like body image through a proxy, through, for example, an avatar, that can be incredibly powerful. And this is something that we've been working on a lot, like how can you visualize certain type of data, for example, in those types of proxies, data about your physiological body, your sleep, your well-being, and so on and so forth. I'm not saying that those are ready to go as of today, but those are areas where, you know, you can't boil the ocean, but you could start from those. And that wouldn't really be enterprise, but that would be more on the consumer side that I could see clicking. But, you know, question is when exactly? But I don't think we're too far away there.
With respect to the use case that you mentioned, you know, someone doing personal shopping at home or doing something that's personal, right? The data aspect of it, right? Traditionally, the data in the past 10, 15 years, most data has been owned by the companies, right? And there's immense amounts of data about individual, right? With the advent of Meta, now you have, you know, body movements, gestures, facial expressions associated with the event that is happening in their life at the moment, right? So huge amounts of data, right? Given that you are in a company that values privacy from a user perspective, how do you see that playing out in Metaverse world?
I mean, look, there's a ton of data in everything that you interact with programmatically, but there's also a ton of data in everything that you interact with in the real world. So if we think about from the end user point of view, we should be able to harness that value, not thinking privacy, but just thinking of value. Like, how do we ourselves, for example, get a realistic avatar? I mean, that obviously has to be colored from somewhere, photographs or physiological measurements or something. So we need data to construct this reality that we interact with. Then the way that we look at application developers, right now, you said that most of this data is owned by enterprises. Let's be very clear, all of it's owned by enterprises. It's shifting, however. For example, there are laws here in California that say that, you know, data that's actually generated by me, it's mine. The biggest question that we're trying to solve as a company is, what do we do with that? And what we're trying to do is really give app developers a choice that they can build centralized models where they retain the data and then they create some value for the consumer. That's fine. A lot of use cases, and that's absolutely valid. But then using our framework, they can also create applications where the user retains the data that are individualized. Now, just kind of as a segment, why this might actually matter, we're all quite unique. And as it comes to our own avatars and how our own bodies and mind react to certain type of things, I mean, we're not segments. We're not segments in a centralized database. We're individualized, you know, human beings. And if we're actually going to create representative apps, representative experiences and services, I mean, you have to start from an individualized data set in the longer term. Now, like the Metaverse, that doesn't start right away, but we've already been working with over 20,000 developers and number of consumer product brands, and it's completely possible today. It just requires a little bit more developer creativity. But that's the one thing that we absolutely love to see.
Ankita, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think the world is changing, and Web3 and Metaverse, they're kind of like pushing the world to change in that direction. So, like we were talking about it, right? That even today, like most of our data is owned by the Googles and the Facebooks of the world. But slowly that shift is happening where users are getting more and more control over their data. For example, you might have heard of the Brave browser, right? Which it's become so popular these days. And the idea is that the user controls their data. They get to see what ads they see. They decide how many ads they see, and they get paid for seeing those ads. So there are there's just a lot of action happening in the data privacy domain, and it's obviously pushed by the GDPR regulations and the California regulations. So the world and from a regulatory perspective as well, there are like shifts that are happening where users are getting more and more control over their data. So at our company Persona, that's one of the things that we stand for, where we want the users to actually own their data. And Metaverse is actually a great example, right? Because there's so many interactions that happen in the Metaverse, but it all happens via my wallet. So I'm still an unknown entity. So people don't know whether I'm a male, I'm a female. They don't know whether I live in India, I live in Africa, or I live in the US. They don't know my gender. They don't know how old I am. So a lot of this data is abstracted. But at the same time, Metaverse is making it possible through tokens, through incentive mechanisms, for users to actually have better control over the data. So I see the world moving towards that direction. And recently, Apple as well, you might have heard of the entire dispute that happened between Apple and Facebook, where Apple said that it's not going to share third-party data anymore. So it's making the data more and more anonymized. So that's actually a positive that I see coming out of this entire Metaverse and Web3 becoming more mainstream.
Cool. Very cool. What?
So I'm going to take a little contradictory opinion on this and like to see what you guys think. I mean, obviously, we've been hearing a lot, data privacy, everybody's worried about it. And, I teach a couple of young people every semester, and I ask them this question as to how important is it to them. And most of the time, I don't see them being that really concerned. It looks like we are the only ones in the industry concerned about it because we are the ones who created this problem and we know the solution to it. So I'm just wondering, so first question I'd like to ask everybody is, how much is a common person really worried about data privacy as much as we are? I.e., do I want to really own my data, and is that really most important to me? In my Maslow's hierarchy, where does it really stand?
Sorry. Go. Yeah. So we did a hackathon in July with 158 teams. And before the hackathon and the kickoff, this was with an insurance company. Then we were talking about this exact theme. And the moderator then asked me very similarly the question. And then we had, 300 people in the audience. And I asked them that, okay, well, let's play this out. So how many of us are willing to share our data for creating better drugs for treating childhood cancer? I mean, 100% for me. Okay. So that's more or less majority. Well, okay, how about how many of us are, willing, eager to share our data to optimize targeting ads? Okay.
Only Paul.
Okay, well, then think about it the other way around. Okay, your genetic data, your DNA. How many of you are interested in sharing your DNA with Spotify to create better playlists for you? Okay, how many would you like to see what type of playlist your DNA would create if you didn't have to share it? So here's the thing, it's not binary. It's use case specific, and it's not a simple question of like, do you want to share it or not? And we're very purely a data company. So we kind of think of, some cases have certain sensitivities and there's a spectrum. But the way that we see it in the future is that it's actually a value question. Like, what's in it for you? If you as a user, take the iOS example, for example, if you're asked that, do you want this app to track you or do you not want it to track you? I mean, all things being equal, why would you want it to track you? I mean, that's creepy as, anything. So this is kind of a question at the end of the day that, what are you getting? So I think essentially when we test it out, and we have tested this a bunch with end users, it's always at the point of asking the question, what do you get? If you're, contributing towards something that you really believe in, like, for example, solving some very, very important question like childhood cancer treatment, I mean, absolutely, then it's very, very warranted. But if you're helping somebody tweak a targeting algorithm for advertising, I mean, count me out.
What about the negative scenario? For example, your data is not private, right? Someone is making decisions for your stuff using your data, but you don't have a say in that. For example, approval of loans, for example, right? Your data you don't control. If it is public, someone is looking at it and then making a call saying, based on past, 20 years ago you did something, I'm going to use that information to deny your loan, right? So again.
So this is where I kind of draw a line in the sand, because everything that I talked about, that's realistic and practical. But we can't change the status quo. Like, we can't today decide that, okay, Facebook has all my data, I want them to stop. What can I do? I mean, class action lawsuit, maybe, but that's a very, very difficult thing. It might happen step by step, but I think we can't really expect to change the entire world at once. What we can expect is to create apps that have, let's say, a different core of assumptions at the start. And then step by step, if consumers so choose, and this goes exactly to Paul's point, if consumers choose that that's the model that they prefer, then argument says that that would essentially be dominant in the future. But for now, I think it comes down to use cases. And in some use cases, there's different sensitivities.
Paul, you had something you want to say?
Yeah, so let me just, I go to various websites, right? So because of all the regulation, they have these bunch of questions. And they ask you a question not in the way the Apple asks, don't track. So they just ask it, you just change the few words, right? And I can assure you 90% or 100% of you just say yes because you don't want the nuances of trying to figure out what data to give and all that, because you just want to get that information, right? So if Apple had asked this question slightly differently, I would have told you nothing would have changed. Apple chose to ask the question in this manner, and now they are actually leveraging our private data to run ads on us. So I don't think, they are the Mr. Privacy czar, but they're not really any better than anybody else. So I always have this question with my kids. They say, okay, which jungle do you want to go to? Do you want to go to Google jungle? Do you want to go to Apple jungle or Amazon jungle? Because whichever jungle you go in, there is no way out. You're caught in that jungle and everything is going to be serviced to you and you're just going to become a slave of that jungle. So the question I have for all of you guys is it even possible in today's world with the power that we have given with this data to these big giant companies? Because in Web3, we want to, decentralize data. Great. If that were to happen, would there ever be a big company, software company in existence like the one? And if not, why are VCs so crazy about investing in this space? So maybe there is not a Google and a Facebook 20 years from now, but there will be some other Google 2.0 and Facebook 2.0 and Apple 3.0. If that's what we are going to see, what's the point?
I think I agree mostly to what Paul is saying, but I would like to say that, like I was saying before as well, that the world is shifting. So there is a possibility that a Google search might get disrupted by a Brave. Similarly, there is a possibility that a Facebook or an Instagram might get disrupted by a decentralized version of Instagram or Facebook, where I get to control my data. And it's not going to happen today, but it's going to happen maybe like 3 years from now, 5 years from now. The difference today is that people are aware, people know that their data is being used. They might or might not care, but if given an option, a choice. So until now, we didn't have a choice. If given a choice, people would prefer the other option. Like for instance, I might be not a majority today, but I have completely stopped using Chrome. I have stopped using Safari. I have stopped using any other browser. I use Brave browser, and I'm not saying that that's the only option, but I'm saying that these options are emerging now more and more.
So, since you're holding the mic, Ankita, the next question is for you, and it is in Web3 because we did say this is about Web3 too, right? So again, my understanding of Web3 is that you build much more openly, right? But as part of it, you grow a community, but part of your community is also stakeholders.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you balance the demands between your community and your stakeholders? Because there could be a ratio. If you just have one simple board who's your stakeholder, you can deal with 2 or 3 people. But if you have a community of that, a group of them, so how do you manage that?
Yeah, and that's a very good question. I think there's a spectrum. There are different types of Web3 companies. Some of them are like completely decentralized and they are run by DAOs, where you have a lot of stakeholders who have a say on your roadmap. And then there are like hybrid companies which are like a mix of Web2, Web3, where most of the decision making still is pretty centralized. And there are pros and cons to both. Of course, Web3 is all about having your customers having a skin in the game and owning a part of your company, which is why they get a say in the decision making. The beauty of it is that you get to build products that your customers love and they feel like they are a part of. But it also comes with the challenge that decision making gets like hairy a little bit because there are so many people who are involved in making that decision. So I believe very strongly that there will be a future where complete decentralization might not happen. There will be some decisions which will be decentralized and voted upon, but a lot of it will still be happening in a centralized manner for the sake of speed, for the sake of making sure that a lot of cooks are not like spoiling what the end product might look like. So that's what I believe, that's the future, which is like a slightly hybrid way of existing, and probably the right way as well, because these core decisions, they need to happen in a way where a person very close to the business knows what's the right way to build the product or what's the right way to put things on the roadmap. So I think that's where we are going to land in the future.
So it's more a hybrid model.
Slightly hybrid. Maybe a part of it is like, completely decentralized and voted upon, but largely I feel like most of the important decisions are going to be more happening in a more centralized fashion, which we are seeing today as well. A lot of these decentralized companies are moving slightly towards that model where this split is happening.
Okay, got it. Marcus, any opinion on that one?
I think there's a lot of interesting layers to this question. Like, for example, I'm 100% on board with what Ankita said around kind of maybe optimizing just for efficiency in some situations, like you have to get decisions made. There are some layers which I find absolutely fascinating. For example, like different open AI layers. So as an example, there are areas where lacking a central decision and having more of a decentralized consensus could actually make a ton of sense. So for example, let's take algorithms that govern, for example, artificial cars and their steering. If we could have a decentralized, let's say, agreed upon standard for how they prioritize, for example, the type of accidents that they get into, then that could potentially make designing something like that actually tenable. Because if you have somebody that designs the way that it weighs, for example, different types of lives, then it's not a decision. It's not a decision that humans can make, really. But that being said, I think it does for companies. Like, you need to be able to, for like what we were talking about, Facebook being the largest or the most well-funded startups need to be able to make decisions, and they need to be able to make them rather quickly. I saw this diagram that I can't get out of my head, or this picture a couple of weeks ago by our product team, which was a pizza that weighed in essentially everybody's feedback. And it had like everything on it. It had fish, it had turkey, it had everything. And it's like stuck in my head that what happens when you essentially take in everybody's votes and then bake that pizza. So obviously for products that we design, we don't want to have them end up like that.
Right. Paul, which way are you leaning towards? Full decentralized? You want the Web2 centralization, or you want a hybrid?
So I think world is never going to be black and white. It never is. And I think as much as we would like to believe in 10 years from now, Web 2 will still be alive. There will be a Web 2 and a Web 3 and a Web 2.5 and 2.8 and whatever it is. We will see a very different version in 5 years from now than what we think. The purists on the other side of the spectrum who want Web 3 to be totally decentralized, to people who want it totally centralized, the Web 2.0 version. The truth is going to be somewhere in the middle, and everything is going to just that's how the world I've seen work most of the time. So it will come somewhere in the middle of the two extremes, and that's where majority of the market will lie.
On that note, so you mentioned Web 2 and Web 3, right? There are a lot of things on the Web 2 side that we have become really hyper-focused, so that's what we always go for, right? The marketing tactics that we use, the sales tactics we use, the growth metrics, the revenue metrics, all those things that we chase, right? Do you see there is any difference at all between Web 2 and Web 3? It's the same thing, it's just a different way of doing it, or there is a fundamental difference there?
So I think, I'm sure Ankita is dying to answer that question, but I'll give you my opinion, right? I think to some extent, when I hear the Web3 proponent talk everything tokenized and all that, to me, it looks like I'm going to bribe my way out to make things work. To me, tokenization is, creating an NFT or a token or rewarding somebody is no different than really bribing your early users, right? And you don't build a community by bribing your early users. You build a community by having mass adoption of people who really, really care about it. And they care whether you give a token or you don't give a token, which means you have to build the products that really solve a problem that people have. If you don't do that, then in the end, it doesn't matter. You can incentivize all the way you want. It doesn't really matter. I mean, there are people who argue there will be no need for marketing. Just like people say, oh, PLG does not need sales. I mean, what a bunch of crap. PLG is nothing but, new label on an old wine. Nothing sells by itself. We all know that. Nothing markets by itself. So you are going to still need it. It may have different ways that we're going to market it. Yes, some people will try with tokenization, which to means it's like doing a free software, right? How is that different? That's a tokenization in a way. I'm incentivizing people to try my product and somebody will convert and pay me. So I think some of these concepts are going to be same. Some of them, new concepts will come in where we'll use some new, creative ways to get more users. And I think
well, I agree. I think at the end of the day, product building boils down to, are you solving a problem? Do your users care about it? And how well have you solved the problem for them to be like using your product? I think it boils down to that. But there are difference in, like Paul was saying, there are difference in the nuances, right? There is difference in the DNA of who constitute a Web3 audience versus who constitute a Web2 audience, right? So a product that's built in Web3 has to take all of that into account. So we do a lot of like customer intelligence and targeted outreach for Web3. But Web3 is built differently. Like I was saying, you don't have email IDs, you don't have information about the user. So you cannot just blast them with emails. So, or like any other like Facebook or Instagram marketing methods that we are used to. So I think the way or like the execution is going to be different. How you reach out to them is going to be different, and what specifically they care about, that might be different. But on a broad level, at a high level, I think you still have to solve for use case, problem, solution, execution. I think it boils down to that.
I think kind of taking it to the let's say the top level in terms of what's fundamentally different. We were talking earlier about like differences in building products in Web 2 and Web 3. one of the fundamental things that I see is decoupling the app from the data. It's a very, very small nuance, but we kind of ended up, with these apps that they encompass all of the data, and they're kind of thought of as one, but they're really not. The data and the app, they exist separately. And maybe Web3, like the way that I think about Web3 overall is that it's a broader decentralization. It's not technology specific. It's more breaking down the old institutions and coming up with new ones that are more user centric. So the thing that really excites me is not necessarily the way that, how does the different permutations look now in 3 years and 10 years, but it's kind of how we do innovation. And if we can actually decouple the data from the apps, and we can make that data actually something that you don't have to be a Google or an Amazon to build on that data, but anybody can build on that data. I mean, then we might actually have not just 5. I mean, it comes back to the point that, do we have even like the Facebooks in the future, or are they different? What if we separate out like the 5, 10 data monopolies with essentially millions of really, really, really data intensive applications, but in a way that actually they're built using that data, but the data and the app, they're not coupled together anymore. That's kind of the bit that I really love about Web3, that can you actually give developers, broadly speaking, the keys to the kingdom, meaning the data, and then just say that, okay, solve this problem, build what the users want, and build it on steroids, like build millions and millions of permutations. Because in a way, that's the promise of Web3 for me, that if anybody could actually build very, very intelligent applications on data, then we should be coming up with better things that we have today.
Very interesting. On the data part, so for example, lots of data has been created in the last 15, since the web started, right? 20 years, right? System, OpenAI, Stable Diffusion, Character.ai have run these massive language learning models on this data, right? And they created these platforms now that sort of are making creation a bit easy, right? For people who can't draw, they can just go and say something and then boom, something shows up, right? What is the equivalent in the metaverse that we can see happening?
Fascinating question. In terms of Web3, like being able to essentially tell an AI to draw a unicorn cat. I mean, that's a use case where centralized data models makes a ton of sense. Like you just push as much data into the machine as you possibly can.
Right.
What's the equivalent of an individualized kind of application? Well, it could be starting with the individual and the individual's data and what's actually meaningful for them. So I think it comes down to these, let's say that individual agency, like the personal avatars and different things like that, which they're meaningful to you, but they're not necessarily meaningful to the next person because it's not you anymore. I think if we start kind of architecting on data on an individualized level, I mean, it's not a small change. It's basically it's upside down change. But at the same time, you might just end up with this individual agency where essentially you're actually starting from not just painting, for example, unicorn cats. But you're actually starting with like, okay, what does the individual baseline actually become? As an example, because this is very, very vague, let's think about, for example, something as simple as that personalized avatar. If you populate it with all of your data that you have, like your preferences, your physiological data, your sleep, and so on and so forth, I mean, that's going to be a reflection of you. That's the type of things that I think you could expect to see in basically every single type of application, that it actually reflects your experience in the metaverse, where essentially it's not just that you're walking into somebody else's world, almost walking into your own.
Right. Actually, as you're saying it, I was reminded of what you said earlier, curing cancer for kids, right? If everyone's genome is in their own private store, and then how the ALS campaign ran a few years ago, the Ice Bucket Challenge, and recently they said they approved an FDA drug based on that funding that came out of it. If people's if you promote it and then people start consenting, saying, yes, I do want to give my genome for this specific purpose. And of course, government spends billions of dollars trying to find cures. Everyone can maybe get a slice of, everyone who donated maybe can also reap the benefits of that funding and money.
Absolutely. So we work a lot with federated training of applications because we work with individualized data sets. So you can't do centralized machine learning. You have to do federated machine learning, which is how you train applications on phones, for example. This is an area which is still obviously very, very early. But like you mentioned about the incentives of, let's say, pharma trials, for example, if you volunteer and there's new drug that comes out, maybe you get some royalties for participating in that. That's super, super interesting. It's also a very, very complicated field. So, for example, one of the visions that we have is that if you can train different types of applications on top of your data, you should be able to train different types of AI on top of your data. What if essentially it's not you consenting? What if it's your AI by proxy of you consenting into something? Then, you start having various very elaborate discussions about who actually gets those royalties and who doesn't. But generally speaking, I see that type of trend is already happening. And for example, I know for a fact that this is something that many of the organizations such as the FDA, they're already actually quite advanced in thinking about how do they utilize not just the centralized data sets, but for example, more of these individualized ones for becoming more effective at targeted treatments.
Right, got it. Makes sense. I have two last questions for the panel. This one is, these two are for all of you. So maybe Ankita, you can start. So, what should be the code of conduct for product managers when pursuing new technologies? So, for example, just to give some negative of it to illustrate what I'm trying to get to. For example, there was, I think a few years ago, Facebook, it was revealed that Facebook actually ran psychological experiments on their users by manipulating their emotions, right? And actually published a paper out of it, right? And then later it was condemned and saying that's not the way of doing it. So technology allows product managers, who are typically the creators, to do a lot of things. Is there something that we should maybe put in place or at least start discussing for new technologies like Web3 and Metaverse, which can change the world significantly?
Yeah, definitely. So I think starting first of all with data privacy, right? I think that's something which kind of gets taken care by Web3, but a lot of, like we were discussing earlier today, even a lot of Web3 applications are not fully decentralized. So product managers who are moving from the who are used to the Web 2 ethos and they're moving into Web 3, I think this is one of the primary things that they keep in mind, because Web 3, when we build Web 2 products, especially consumer product, one of the primary things that we keep in mind is, okay, how do we drive a lot of traffic to that product? And one of the ways of doing that is, collecting and harvesting a lot of user data and then driving traffic and driving targeted ads to these people who are more likely to be interested in what the product is about. So I think being more cognizant of how you make that growth happen of your product, so building incentive structures around it, being more upfront about how the data is being collected and things like that. That's of course one. The second is that in Web3, a lot of what PMs are used to doing in Web 2, that's changing. First of all, I think inherently the role of PM is changing. In the Web 2 world, PM are used to being, the front of it, the center of it, driving vision and strategy and all of that. In Web 3, I think PMs have to be more open about whether they are required, whether they need to be on the forefront, because a lot of these Web 2 products, they are more about the user experience part of it is very limited. There are more concerns around security, transaction, hash, and things like that. So if you see, like in Web3 world, these strategy docs have been replaced by white papers. And these white papers are fairly technical in nature. So I think this entire paradigm shift that's happening in terms of what the role of a PM is, so they should be prepared that they shouldn't try to bring everything that they learned in the Web2 world, they shouldn't directly transport it into the Web3 world, because some of it might not be relevant. So that's two. They should be prepared that their role might change. And third is, I think, this entire focus on community. So in Web 2, we talk about this product market fit, and we talk about like product first. But a lot of Web 3 is actually community first. So the PMs who are actually like coming into Web 3, they should focus a lot, especially in the early days, as to like how to get this minimum viable community instead of the minimum viable product, and how to keep that growing. So just being very cognizant of how Web3 products are built, how they scale, what is important, what's not important. I think that's essential.
Very cool. Thank you. Paul?
So Ankita, very, very good points you raised. But I think even if you don't even go to Web3, right? I mean, if I look at the data being used or misused, as we can say in, AI could be a, responsible AI is something that is being talked about. Now, in medicine, you have a code of conduct. In legal, you have a code of conduct. But why is it that we don't have a code of conduct for product management, who are really controlling, in some sense, so many things, right, in our lives? So I think there is kind of a need for this to be a code of conduct that needs to be in place, even for Web 2, even for AI, for everything. Because if we don't do that, we are going to create, so many irresponsible products that are really not going to be beneficial to us, but are probably going to be harmful. I mean, this is kind of why I think, somebody built a bomb, right, for a purpose that today shouldn't be allowed to do, but it is still happening. And so I think there is really no true conscious only thing. So I hope some point, people can get together and really create a movement to really create this code of conduct that is supposed to be followed, and people earn some points. Maybe you can use Web3 to do that. And, with tokenization, we can maybe even make people be responsible.
Marcus?
I think the closest that we really have is if we can actually offer users a legitimate choice in terms of what type of applications that they use. Like right now in Web 2, the choice is that you use the application or you don't. And a lot of consumers are dropping off a lot of the Web3 platforms, choosing that they don't need them or that they're particularly harmful. I think in the future, if we can actually offer that choice, all things being equal, how would you like to actually use apps? We would get essentially vote by usage. I'm a huge believer in the open market, but that being said, especially in consumer products, then it's colored by the fact that users oftentimes use things that are easy. But that said, we've talked about data quite a bit on this panel. And if we just extrapolate a little bit, right now you have some legitimate knowledge about the amount of data that we have. If we just think about, let's say, 5 years or 10 years into the future, the amounts of data that we're expected to have, I mean, people will only get more and more and more educated on the amount of information that, arguably they possess. So I think it comes down to, can we actually introduce those types of choices where consumers can actually make a proper choice? Like Paul was saying earlier, then, I mean, the privacy policies, GDPRs and CCPAs, I mean, they just made the internet suck, really. Like you have these things that, are clicking through and you can't figure them out. And I mean, it's almost like a race to get them to go away, whatever you click. That's not a legitimate choice. I mean, that's just a joke. So can we actually build something that's actually a choice? I think that's one of the paradigm shifts that we'll see.
And you're saying that itself will define the code of conduct automatically, because once that is explicitly done, it will drive a code of conduct.
I think in a way it will drive a product benchmark. That if we can actually build empowering products also on the data side, then I mean, and we can actually have that type of a choice, then the overall general population, they should start using them more because they're more beneficial to them. I think, no, it won't drive a code of conduct directly, but it might drive a benchmark.
Okay, makes sense. My final question, Marcus, starting with you, is this is going to be speculative, of course, like all final questions should be. So, any new technological advance, typically in the past, has done two things. One, it probably killed something, like made irrelevant a previous technology. But it also, it also created some space for older technologies. An example would be when the cars started getting popular, horse buggies went away. But trains didn't die because airplanes started. They also had a space. So if you were to guess Metaverse, what do you think is going to make it irrelevant in the future? And what do you think will survive alongside Metaverse?
Yeah, it's like the example that some engineer said that somebody should create a centralized Airbnb. Yes, this is a great question. I think at the end of the day for Metaverse, I mean, what will make it both relevant and irrelevant is it has to become boring. Like right now, it's just so overhyped, and it's driven by technology geeks like me that are in it for not necessarily end user utility, but just because they can geek out on something. That's not really the population that we're after. So in a way, we have to make the use cases boring enough so that it actually becomes stable. It's both going to make it irrelevant and it's going to make it relevant again, but it's probably going to be just a lot more boring than what we actually expect it to be right now. It's sort of a non-answer to your question, but that's the one that I've got.
Okay. Ankita?
So I have a lot of thoughts on that. I think I look at Metaverse more as an enhancer rather than like a killer of existing things. So what I do see happening is that the Metaverse experience itself becoming very seamless and immersive for in the coming years. So I don't see phones getting killed or phones dying, but essentially the phones evolving in a way that it can like basically support your Metaverse experience in either like AR, VR, some technology that the phone becomes advanced enough to support. I think what I also see changing is like these siloed IDs and data that we have like all across the internet. So we have like a login for A, login for B, and it's like we have like hundreds of logins and hundreds of data silos. So I see that consolidating in some way in the Metaverse, because essentially like when you see all these like new companies, right, they're trying to consolidate all of it in the Metaverse, where you have like a single unified ID and you're able to like access like different accounts using that. So I definitely see some consolidation happening on that front. What I don't want to happen, and this is more like a wishful thinking, is essentially a replaying of Ready Player One, where we are all so engrossed in the Metaverse that we forget that we have a real life. So that is something which I absolutely don't want to happen, because already we are seeing that especially the younger generation, they're so engrossed with their phones. There are like these real life communication relationships, they are becoming more infrequent and harder to sustain and maintain. So that is one direction that I don't want the world to take.
Cool. Paul?
So I think Marcus made an interesting point that I want to sort of talk about, that we have not come to the chasm yet. We're very, very far away in Web3 and in Metaverse. So I think trying to predict what will happen by the time we cross the chasm is probably years away. It's not going to happen overnight. So if anybody is wondering, like, would I have a job I'm in Web 2, I think you're safe for next few years for sure. So stay there. But I think also to the point of, is Metaverse a replacement technology or is it an enhancing technology of an experience? And I think I kind of agree with Ankita on that it is more of an enhancement rather than a replacement. because your phone is going to get more and more powerful. And maybe just like I have a watch today to do certain things, I may have a glass to do certain things, but the power is going to come from my phone, because I can't have my glass have the same amount of power that I'm already carrying in my phone and having to charge it every 10 minutes. That's just not going to be practical. Which is why I believe that, it's very difficult for a company like Facebook, who does not own a device in my pocket, to control that AR VR experience. And it is somebody who controls the device in my pocket is more likely to own that experience than anyone else. So that's kind of my opinion. And I think, we will probably also see that, like Marcus said, the future will be very boring, in the sense of there is the combination of various use cases. And when it goes to the mainstream, it's probably not going to be interesting for the geeks. And we will probably have, by that time, talking of Web4.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much. This was a fantastic panel. Great answers. I might have taken a step towards moving away from sugar water, but thank you so much. And good night.
So while all of you are on stage, I would like to thank Naveen, Paul, Ankita, and Marcus. There's one thing that the earlier speaker spoke about. How can we really help you and add value? In fact, Marcus shared what he would like us to do. Right? So there's a question for everybody here. What type of app would you like to build or use? If you could use data without ever sharing it externally, use it privately. So the audience and folks who are here can feel free to think about it, and the link is always available. What we do at Crowd Product is we extend the engagement beyond the lifetime of just a meetup or event. So this link, this engagement, this video, these takeaways will be available for much more longer. We do know that Microsoft Ignite event is going on, the TechCrunch Disrupt event is going on, multiple things. So our goal is going to be ensure that at least 1,000 people engage with this session beyond the lifetime of just this event. If any of you have more requests in the audience or as part of the panel, feel free to let us know. We do run a product managers community on Slack. We run a Web3 community on Telegram. We run 40 WhatsApp groups, as well as the Indus Entrepreneurs 71 chapters. So you can be rest assured that there will be continuous engagements, and we'll be more than happy to help all of you. Any final thoughts, feel free to share. Otherwise, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Albina and the Microsoft team for doing such a great job at such short notice and for making things happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so what we're going to be doing is